Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome to our episode of A Time for Truth show. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, and I really very happy to be with you again today from Canal America, and my favorite engineer, Buddha Victor, who's helping do the show from Atlanta, Georgia, which is why you see that beautiful painting in the background. We're doing it from Loretta Studios in Atlanta. And that actually leads into the show. And you say, well, how can that be, Dr. Fialkoff? Well, it deals with something called the components of understanding. Affinity, which means liking or hating. Reality, which means agreements. And communication, which is what I'm doing with you right now. And so what happens is a engineer who studied mankind and was trying to improve mankind, studied what stressed mankind out. And he studied what was causing his difficulties in the world. And he discovered something called a reactive mind. And then he realized that there were different emotional levels that occurred because of these past experiences that were not too good. And so he was trying to figure out how to help people. And he saw that there were different emotions. And, what happened is he found affinity. And the affinity were the emotions. And he realized that if he was going to speak to an angry man, he couldn't be super happy because the angry man would get very upset. He discovered when he spoke to, an apathetic man, that he had to speak in a lower tone because otherwise, what would happen is that he would communicate to the apathetic person. So that's called affinity. And today we have affinity because our friend Loretta actually allowed us to use her studio. I met her today at a special conference we had with a lot of important people who were looking at how to help the world. So this conference, which was in Atlanta, had a lot of affinity for what we call mankind. Why is that? Because they all came and took time from their daily schedule to actually sit together without getting recompense, without worrying about their pay or working, but actually doing something different, looking at how to help in our community, looking at how to coordinate. We had people there of all different creeds, races, nationalities, which again is another example of a high affinity. Why a high affinity? Because we all got along. There was no rioting. There was no stabbing. There was no shooting, which is a very low affinity. And we all communicated. There was a lot of communication. And the leader of the group was really very efficient at organizing us. So the communication was very good. And the reality was there because we all had an agreement that we want to bring some normality to life. We want to bring, just something that we can count on. We want to help our communities. And so that reality existed in this conference that I'm calling you from here in Atlanta. Another example of affinity happens to be the painting behind me, which I chose for our show. I'm actually in a warehouse right now, Loretta's warehouse, and she runs her shows out of here. And so we were trying to find a nice background. I said, I like that picture in the background. I have no idea what it is, but I think the artist did a great job and it communicates to me. And so it seemed to be something that I wanted to put on the show for you, and it created understanding. And you can see how those three components, the affinity, the reality, and the communication, which make a triangle, came together to form understanding. Now, that triangle, when we have more liking and more understanding and more communication, like we do in like a sports game where our favorite team is about to win the NBA championship and the last guy dunks the ball, boom, and the crowd goes wild. There's tremendous affinity, there's tremendous communication. The reality goes out the roof, and luckily enough, the roof stays intact. The building doesn't explode because there is so much energy that it's tangible, and you can feel it in the stadium, in that forum. It's amazing. I know I've been to Madison Square Garden, and it gets rocking and rolling when the Knicks are doing well, and it gets very low and quiet and sad when they're really not having a good day and they're not playing well at all. So those are examples of affinity, reality, communication leading up to understanding. So I started to tell you that this man Hubbard, this engineer, was looking for how to help mankind, and he discovered this reactive mind. And he discovered that sometimes, because situations reminded that person of the past, they started acting out as if they were in the past. And what happens, they got angry. They didn't want to get angry. They actually lost control. And when they had that low emotion, what happened is they broke their rapport with the other person because the other person was in shock. They didn't know what happened. They go, well, what happened? What did I do? Really, they did nothing except that some situation occurred that caused that other person to lose their affinity for the other. Once you lose the affinity, it's like having a breakup with your girlfriend, with your boyfriend, with your fiance, with your wife. There's a big shock. There's a rupture of all that energy that you had linked together, and there's an explosion. Sometimes that explosion can be a marital upset. Sometimes that explosion can be an upset with your girlfriend. Sometimes that explosion could be a physical fight with your friend. You know, if it's guys, sometimes, we get physical. What are you going to do? We like to play sports, and I guess the caveman reflex comes out, and we have a physical fight. That's a low affinity, but there is a lot of communication. And it's very interesting because you see them boxing, they're there and they're beating each other up. Oh, my Lord. And the reality is anger and antagonism. And they're but they're communicating really well because they're punching and hitting, and they're in the ring. And they have an affinity, even though the affinity is hating each other. They're in that ring and they don't move from that ring. So they share the common space. And what do you see at the end of the fight? In almost all the fights, at the end of killing each other, somehow or other, they start hugging. And there's all this understanding. And one guy says, yeah, I was trying to block off, but I got to like you. And the other guy goes, yeah, I knocked you out, man, but you're a tough guy. You're the toughest guy I ever fought. And you see guys walk out of the ring. That's normally what happens. Sometimes it doesn't, but that's because the guy who doesn't want to do that is stuck in something that you have to investigate by going online onto Dianetics called the reactive mind. Very interesting, very, very interesting. So if you want to change your life, look into it. Now, what we're going to do, engineer Buddha Victor is going to put on a video for you. He has it already. This video is going to go over the components of understanding. So Buddha Victor, please put on the video for our audience so they can watch this components of understanding.
We all strive to understand each other.
No, it's not right. No.
But despite our best intentions, we encounter upsets, differing opinions, and misunderstandings.
No, look, it's no good. You just don't get it. None of you understand.
We all have to work together.
These are last spots.
Live side by side. And cooperate with one another. But sometimes it seems like this is easier said than done.
I can't do this anymore. I mean, I don't know what he wants or what I'm doing wrong.
How many times do I have to tell you? You are grounded.
Dad, everybody else is...
We might have trouble getting along with a particular person in our life.
My house. I'm your father. Come back here, young lady.
Or struggle to understand a new skill or a new tool. If there was some way to increase our understanding of people and situations, that would be a very valuable thing to know. Well, in Scientology, it was discovered that all human relationships, and in fact, any activity in life, can be improved once you know what understanding really is. You see, to understand anything or anyone, 3 things must be present. They are affinity, reality, and communication. By affinity, we mean emotional response. We mean the feeling of affection for someone or something, or the lack of it. Now, reality is agreement. What we agree to be real is real. For instance, 2 people who both agree that a certain team is the best share the same reality on that subject. And by communication, we mean the interchange of ideas between 2 people.
Go ahead, Joe.
How's that, Bill?
Beautiful, Joe. Looks perfect.
Now, affinity, reality, and communication are very much related.
Listen.
You see, if you don't have any affinity for someone, you won't find very much to agree about. And so there will be little, if any, communication. Likewise, without communication, there can be no agreed upon reality, and therefore no affinity. And have you ever tried to talk to an angry man?
5 jalapeno. I don't order jalapeno.
He certainly doesn't have much affinity,
Another jalapeno? What?
and he's clearly not in agreement with you.
I won't take this if it's for free, all right?
And an angry man may be shouting words, but he's definitely not in communication with you.
One jalapeno, maybe 2 jalapeno, but not 5 jalapeno.
Affinity, reality, and communication are so interdependent, one upon the other, that you can think of them as a triangle. To have any 2 corners, you have to have the third. In Scientology, this is referred to as the ARC triangle. All 3 factors must be present in any kind of relationship for understanding to occur. Here's an example. These 2 guys share a common reality about classic cars. They both agree this is a great one.
1957 Pontiac 3-star Super Chief. Sure don't make them like this anymore. You got that right.
So, they have a high level of communication.
Great job, pal.
And they have a lot of affinity. You could say that their ARC is high, and they understand each other, at least when it comes to classic cars. The ARC triangle has many valuable applications in life. You see, it's only necessary to improve 1 corner of this triangle in order to improve the remaining 2 corners. For example, this father and daughter only have to find something they can agree about.
Dad, these yours?
Yeah,
to raise their reality about each other.
These are pretty cool.
I have my moments, eh?
This in turn will improve their level of communication, and their affinity for each other will rise. On the other hand, if 1 point of the triangle is lowered, the other 2 are also lowered. For example, this guy just can't seem to get along with his mother-in-law. He doesn't like her. She can't stand him. They have low affinity. Well, how much do they agree on? Odds are, not much. Therefore, they're not that real to one another. Low reality. How willing is he to talk to her? Not a lot. Low communication. Now, if he just picks 1 corner of the triangle and improves that, he'll find the other 2 corners will also improve. Let's say he can find something they can agree upon. Reality.
Marjorie, I really like your roses. They're really pretty.
All of a sudden, even if it's not a spectacular change.
Thank you. They took a lot of hard work.
I can imagine.
I bred them myself, you know.
Wow.
He'll find that she'll at least start to communicate with him, and their affinity will begin to rise.
Even the red ones and the purple ones?
By raising each point of the triangle, they'll end up having higher and higher ARC, and understanding for each other. This applies to any area of life. Marriages.
That sounds wonderful.
Work.
Now all these together make a team, guys.
Friendships. And even when learning a new skill or working with new tools. The more you communicate with something, the more real it will become to you, and the higher your affinity will be for it. In fact, communication is the most important factor of the three.
As you can see, the main thing is that the chairs are ergonomic, comfortable, mobile.
It might be said that the triangle begins with communication.
Really good ideas.
Oh, that's great.
In Scientology, you're going to learn much more about the ARC triangle and its uses.
Did you get the orchids?
Yes, I did.
Excellent.
With it, you'll have the tools to increase your understanding of everyone you know or come in contact with, as well as the world around you.
It's actually one of my favorite ones that I've made.
By using affinity, reality, and communication, a better life, built on understanding, is easily within reach.
These lines of chairs that you designed they're the best. They're absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you.
Okay, so there you have it. And you have the affinity, reality, communication triangle interacting. And you saw that situation at the end of the video, that young man with his mother-in-law. And you saw it was a very stressful situation at the beginning before he and she got along. So let's take a look at this. Let's be positive and let's make it really worthwhile today's show. Take a look at instances in your life where you had that feeling. Were you stressed? Did you feel comfortable or not comfortable? And if you look at it, just think about it. If you're not comfortable, do you think it could lead to a little bit of heartburn? You think you could maybe have some stomach upset and bloating because you're so stressed out? Because we know there's a fight or flight response in the human body, and the autonomic and the autonomic system, sympathetic system, and the parasympathetic, the autonomic system, which has two portions to it. Fight or flight response, autonomic, sympathetic, parasympathetic. And so, we want to be comfortable, because if we're not comfortable, sometimes our hormones can go out of whack and we have problems. Sometimes you get back problem. I know some people say, oh my God, and they got a backache. But all of a sudden they get into a different situation, a little stress relief, and they feel better. So what does affinity and reality communication and understanding do is that it creates for you a more harmonious day. Your day goes easier. You get more accomplished with less headache, with less strife. Now let's go over a word that they use in that video, which is called Scientology. So what is this thing, Scientology? So logos means study in Latin, study of, skio, knowledge. So it's a study of knowledge. So why so much uproar about this thing and all these wild ideas about what it is? Very simple. If people were less stressed out, they probably would be healthier. And unfortunately, yeah, I did say that. If they were healthier, my God, it could affect some economic repercussions on certain people. I happen to be a doctor, so I can say that. Because if all my patients who needed gum surgery got healthier all of a sudden, I would be out of a job. But I would be living up to my Hippocratic oath. And we'd have to find another job. It's like your father-in-law says, go find a job. So you would have to find a different job. But that would be really good, because we'd eliminate disease. Now, that's just one example. And I'm not telling you that by implementing affinity that you're going to get rid of your diseases. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is if we can decrease stresses, probably you would have a better chance of having your doctor, your physician, or your dentist help you to heal. Because I can tell you that in terms of the affinity, if I have a patient and they're in calm state and they're relaxed and they have a good relationship in their family and their job is okay, they tend to heal better from the physical treatment that I do. So what I'm saying to you that yes, this bedside manner and the physical side go together, because we are human beings. We're not some kind of piece of wood or some kind of metal, a sheet metal, where you just do the bolts and it works. No, we actually have emotions, and those emotions do affect us. So those are called the components of understanding And now you see how they go together. Now, let's talk about this a little bit more. Let's say that you have somebody and, they're part of a group and maybe a choir. Let's say they're a choir, a church choir, and they're supposed to sing. And, on one Sunday they get there late because they slept late. And why they sleep late? Because the night before, even though they were in church choir, maybe they drank a little too much. And that can happen. Doesn't make them a bad person, but they drank too much. Now they're late to the church choir, and they feel they committed a harmful act because they shouldn't have drank possibly, and they're late. And they don't say anything, and everybody forgives them. But then comes the next Sunday, and maybe now they have an upset, and they with their favorite other, their spouse, and they have an upset over what happened the week before. And so he comes late again, or she. It's nothing sexual, it could be he or she. And they come late to the church choir again. Now they get a little upset with him. And where's his affinity going? His affinity is going down. But as all human beings, none of us want to be wrong. If I were to ask you right now while you're watching me, do you want to be wrong? You'd probably say, no, I don't want to be wrong. I want to be right. And, but I want to do the right thing. I'm not a bad person, but I want to be right. So what happens? In order to be right, they have to justify what they did at the church choir those 2 weekends. And now they start cutting their affinity with their church choir. If it goes too far and they never really solve the situation by getting their integrity in and by repairing what happened, maybe by painting some room in the church or doing a donation, then they keep feeling bad about it and justifying it, and they will leave the church choir. And there's your explanation of why affinity starts to drop down. Now, I'm going to do something for those people out there who are in relationships. And you were wondering, you go, man, I was doing so good with Bobby for so long. And all of a sudden he says he needs a break. He needs to have some space. He needs to have some time. I should relax and chill out. Well, that's a cutting of affinity. Why is he cutting the affinity? Now, this could be the woman doing it too. So don't think I'm picking men or women. Because, I always get a kick out of this. Women said men are bad. I've always wondered, like, women are so smart. Who are the men fooling around with? Women. But then I don't understand. It has to be equal ratio. So there we go. So in reality, we've solved all that part because now we realize that regardless of your sex, if you commit a harmful act against your partner, your spouse, your friend, you're going to try to individuate. It means you're going to try to separate from them. Why? Because you don't feel comfortable. Why don't you feel comfortable? Well, if you blow up a room, you wouldn't want to go back into the house of the people that you blew up. You feel bad about it. So you'd have to say, well, those people, they have too much money, or, those people never talk to me very nicely and I shouldn't go back there anymore. In reality, the reason you leave and you find all these things wrong with the other person is because of what you did. So how does it have to do with relationships? So here we go. If you're in a relationship and all of a sudden your favorite other tells you they need some space, more than likely they have done something to you, which is why they need the space from you. And they've probably done a few things. So what you can do, if that happens to you and you're watching the show, you say to your favorite other, is there something I don't know about? And you look at them like that. And if they get really upset, they're really cutting affinity with you and they're getting angry. Remember, that's affinity. They did a lot because now they're really getting upset. The more upset that they get, the more you know that they probably did something to you. And so the only way you're going to salvage that relationship is not by buying them a gift or giving them things, whatever it happens to be that you want to give. No. You have to get that person to be honest with you and tell you what they've done to you, which is going to be a little bit tricky because they're going to be upset and they may break some things in the room and the fires will fly and all this good stuff that happens with all human beings. Because if you live on planet Earth, that's what happens. So there's your repair relationships using the affinity reality communication triangle. So how do you do it? You ask, communicate. You go, is there something I don't know that you should tell me about? What is it I don't know? You're communicating. And you do it with affinity. You'll go, is there something you did to me? That would be a very low affinity. It wouldn't work because you need to have understanding. So with a lot of affinity, you would communicate. Is there something that I don't know that you haven't told me about? And you keep a high reality in. letting them know that you really love them, you really care for them, you want to continue this relationship, and be willing for them to explode. But you just stay calm and you allow the communication to occur. It's a miracle. When you allow communication to occur, things will start resolving. And that's how this component of understanding discovered by Mr. Hubbard, the ARC triangle, works. It can get bigger. If you feel it getting smaller in your house and you're speaking to your son, realize that you better stop and communicate and get your son to tell you what he's upset about. You have to start with getting them to speak, because if they won't speak, you're never going to get what they did to you. So you have to start out, you have to be smart, let them speak, keep it calm, and go slowly. And little by little, as it comes off, maybe there won't be a super explosion, maybe just little explosions, or maybe they knock something off the table, but you stay chill, stay calm, let them communicate. You keep going until you get the reality that you want, which is what? The reality that you continue a relationship. All of a sudden he goes, I'm sorry I did that. I got to tell you, the other night there was this lady and I flirted with her a little bit. And if it's a woman, let's not pick on the men all the time. So let me protect my sex. So it's a woman. She goes, there was this guy and I was looking at him. I didn't do anything, but he was hot and I felt bad. And that's why I want some space, because I was really confused. I didn't feel good about myself. There you go. And that's how those components of understanding go together. And I think we're nearing the end of the show. I hope you've enjoyed the show, because relationships are important. And we're going to relate this to humanity now. If you can keep your own relationship, you'll feel a little more confident and you'll feel better about yourself, and you'll tend to do nicer things now that you realize what causes upsets. Because you may say, you know what, that's true. The other day I stayed out playing basketball till 11 o'clock at night. I didn't call her. And you didn't really do anything except play basketball. But she thinks you hung out with some chick, some girl. Or in reverse, the woman maybe was just with her girlfriends having a good time, and he thinks you were fooling around with a guy. You have to have understanding, allow it to communicate, and you save your relationship. You don't get pissed off at each other, but don't expect perfection. It doesn't exist. It may happen, but you continue, communicate. And what this will lead to is you feel more comfortable with yourself, and then you'll go out in the community. Because if you feel comfortable with your relationship, now you go into the church and help people to church. Maybe they have a relationship problem, and you help them there. And from there, the community will start doing it, and it'll work, which is the whole intention of the components of understanding. I think we've reached the end of the show. And so I can't wait to see you on our next episode of A Time for Truth. I'll be back in New York at my favorite studios, Canal America. And I want to thank Buddha Victor for running the show, and Buddha Jorge, who's also the CEO of Canal America, who is all over the world right now, traveling with his family, creating affinity, reality, communication. May you all have a great week. And from A Time for Truth, may our whole world expand with affinity. Thank you for tuning in. I will see you in our next show.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet